Please enjoy this uninterrupted episode brought to you by CourseDog. CourseDog is the intelligent academic operations platform, unifying how higher ed manages scheduling, curriculum, catalog, assessment, and more. Built on a layer of actionable analytics and seamless integrations with every major SIS and LMS, CourseDog is where academic operations drive student success. To learn more, please go to CourseDog.com. That's CourseDog.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Ed Up Experience podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jody Blinko. I am joined by my co-host today, Bridget Moran, Senior Content Manager at CourseDog, and we have our guest with us here, Dr. Carlnita P. Greene, Vice President of Academic Affairs at Cape Cod Community College. Welcome, Carlnita. Thank you for being here with us. Tell us a little bit more about you and your role there at Cape Cod Community College.
Sure. Thank you, Jody. I have actually started my role as Vice President of Academic Affairs at Cape Cod Community College in November, so I'm relatively new to the position, but I do all things academic, as you would say, so ranging from faculty and staff development in academic affairs to working with faculty on curriculum development. I also work very closely with my counterpart, who's the Vice President of Student Services and Enrollment Management, to make sure that we're also providing students with those holistic services that they need to support them academically, as well as personally and professionally. So looking at supporting really the whole student.
Great. Well, hi, Carlnita. I'm so happy that you could join us today. Like you mentioned, you said that you're, fairly new to your position. So I was really hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about, what the transition's been like and what some of your priorities are that you're working on right now.
So the transition has been awesome. I really love 4Cs. It's a wonderful community. And, being in this new position, in this new role, has been, like you said, a period of transition. And so part of what I'm currently doing, aside from setting my priorities, which I'll talk about in a minute, are really learning the organization. So as you know, higher education institutions are all different. They all have their all of their special things about them, the things that make them really unique and wonderful places to work. And so I'm really delving in really deeply to figure out, aside from what I've already seen, what might be some of those deeper things at 4Cs that really make it a special and unique place. So in terms of priorities, really focusing on supporting our students, making sure that their needs are met in terms of the academic side. So looking at ways to offer the courses that they specifically need for their academic majors and their personal and professional goals, but more so also thinking about offering our students flexibility and choice in terms of those courses that we offer, what times we offer, what modalities we offer for students. So that's one of my top priorities. The second one really has to do with focusing on faculty and staff development. I think faculty and staff are key to higher educational institutions, and it's extremely important to make sure that we're providing them with the support that they need professionally, as well as personally. Another priority is really looking holistically, and I'm doing this along with the leadership team. We're focusing on mental health and wellness, not just for our students, but also across the college for faculty and staff. And recently, the college signed the Okanagan Charter, and that actually is specifically focused on ensuring that we have a community of health and wellness throughout the college community. So that definitely is something that I'm very passionate about, and that is something that I am, all in on in terms of supporting our faculty, our staff, our students, and our community. So anyone who comes to our campus.
That's great. And I imagine, too, that part of the role is, of course, developing that relationship with faculty as well. And I saw that, at a number of your previous institutions, you were in those faculty roles. So I'm curious, how has that kind of informed your approach to getting to know your faculty and working with them?
So I think, I was in the classroom myself for over 20 years. So I definitely understand the myriad challenges and opportunities that faculty face when teaching. The role of faculty, in some ways, I'm in a very unique position because I feel like during the course of my career, I've seen the transition of the role of faculty from what it used to be in the past to what it is currently now. And so there are certainly a lot more opportunities, but also responsibilities that faculty have in terms of serving students in ways that traditionally may not have been the case in the past. So I think in terms of getting to build relationships with faculty at 4Cs, my approach really has been to try to get to know them individually as much as possible. So I'm also in the process of doing so, setting up both formal and informal gatherings to be able to connect with faculty. I also really am a person who thinks that faculty success equals student success. And having been, like I said, faculty in the classroom, I think you have to have faculty that are supported and successful in order to have successful students. If you don't, it just doesn't work. So the other thing that I really try to do in my approach to faculty is certainly to acknowledge the fact that I am in a different role. I'm not in the classroom currently, although who knows, one day I may return. And so acknowledging the fact that I am currently in an administrative role, which is different, right? I'm a VPAA, but in the same instance, I also certainly have those years of experience being in the classroom and understanding, just what it is that a lot of faculty do, all the wonderful things that they do pedagogically speaking, not to mention mentoring students, advising students, and supporting them. And then also thinking about that balance that I think is extremely important for faculty to achieve as well, which is taking care of students, but also taking care of self. And so that has also been another way that I approach building relationships with faculty, being realistic about, really figuring out ways to maintain that balance, to offer high quality academic experiences for our students, certainly, and also to support our students. But in addition, checking in and making sure that our faculty are taking care of themselves and that we as a community are taking care of each other, because I think that's extremely important as well.
Carlnita, this might sound like an obvious question, but I think you have a lot of perspective to share from your experience in the classroom, and also this focus that you talk about with the faculty development, but also the balance. What are some of the areas that you think are overlooked when we think about really taking care of that balance of health and wellness for faculty? I mean, obviously they have, they're in the classroom, they're creating, they're grading, they have assessments, but what are from your perspective, what would you offer the folks listening to be thinking about when you talk about that holistic perspective of balance and taking care of faculty?
So I think, from a faculty perspective, one of the things that I had to learn was that I was always very passionate about my students and student success, wanting my students to succeed, love my students like dearly, like anyone who took me as a professor would know, like I really invested in my students' success and success on their terms in terms of what they actually wanted to achieve as individual students. With that being said, I find that one of the key issues for some faculty, I can't say all, and this was something that I struggled with as well, which was maintaining a balance with that devotion. So in academia, I think a lot of times we're expected to be so selfless that sometimes you can just give all of yourself to particular individuals, right? To particular students, to those kinds of things without stopping to realize that if you are not taking care of yourself, if you are not setting boundaries, right, and holding students accountable for things in the classroom, then sometimes that can lead to burnout. So before I left my former position when I was a dean at another institution, I had a dear colleague and faculty member who we had a conversation about the fact that she had given a student an extension, but she had given the student an extension to the point that she was having to do so much additional work in order to support that particular student, in order to ensure that that student would succeed, that it was actually influencing and affecting her own time outside of her normal work schedule, and on it goes. And so one of the things that I had a conversation with her about was, it's great to be flexible. I think we should be flexible. That's the whole goal of higher education, particularly with community colleges. But then we also have to hold people accountable as well, because if we don't, then we run into these situations where you're giving so much of yourself that it leads to burnout, it leads to depression for some people, and all other kinds of health issues that, we don't necessarily think about. So I feel like that's one of the key, again, kind of from the faculty perspective, that's one of the key things that I think is extremely important. From my role currently as VPAA, I'm really interested in hearing from faculty about what we can do as an institution to support them, what kind of professional development we can potentially offer that's going to help them to take care of self and to feel more effective in the classroom. So, that might include trauma-informed pedagogy and practices. That might include, for some faculty and staff, really thinking about what does self-care mean, right? And how do we create a culture in which people feel like it is okay to, if you need to take a vacation day, take a vacation day. And so I think, it varies at different institutions that I've worked at. 4Cs is really good about, from what I've seen so far, that balance of really encouraging people to take care of themselves, right? And I think that that's another key aspect that is really important for people to consider. So what are ways that the institution can support these things? I've also tried to model this, and this is one of the things that we as a team, my leadership team specifically for academic affairs, we've been focusing on. We've had some conversations, and also we've read some articles about mental health. We had some candid conversations about it, because again, I think it's important, for leaders in higher education to also model the kinds of behaviors that we want other people to feel comfortable doing. So.
Yes, I love that. And yeah, I think that really speaks to your holistic approach there, in terms of well-being, not just on, that academic and professional side, but also on that personal side, which I think is so wonderful. I would love to talk a little bit more about your role too in supporting faculty when it comes to curriculum development. Before we hit record here, you were talking a little bit about how you really want to make sure that we're encouraging flexible formats for students, whether that's time of day or the modality. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you're working with faculty and providing development in that way?
Yes, so at 4Cs, we actually have a wonderful teaching and learning center where it's faculty to faculty. And so a lot of the professional development and training that's offered in that area are actually offered by our faculty experts to their peers about different pedagogical strategies, teaching in different modalities. 4Cs also has what's called a high flex option for courses. And that means that the courses are taught, faculty member teaches those courses in person, but then there is the option for a student or students to potentially Zoom into that class. So if a student has childcare issues, needs to take care of a parent, has to, for whatever reason, may not be able to travel to 4Cs, they can opt in to join the class via Zoom. So I think that also has made a world of difference in terms of providing support for our students. And we do specifically have a person who is a coordinator who focuses on providing training opportunities for faculty with regard to high flex options as well. That is another key area, again, being relatively new, that I'm still exploring and wanting to dive further into ways that we can really enhance pedagogical strategies within the context of different modalities, including face-to-face, right? There's always room for improvement, whether it's through a mediated format or whether it's face-to-face.
That's great. I'm curious, as you think about, potentially new types of programs that, the 4Cs might be offering. I know there's a lot of talk about, offering, different programs for upskilling, reskilling. How do you see, some of these more alternative formats potentially playing into those types of programs?
So I think that this is something that most higher education institutions are working on. We certainly at 4Cs are fortunate to have what's called our Center for Corporate and Professional Education, or CCAPE. And so through CCAPE, we offer non-credit programs for a number of students in various areas, including one of ours, which is really expanding, which is marine technology, which is really doing well. I'm so happy about that program. So I think, one of the other key areas of focus in this role is really focusing on ways to build that pipeline from non-credit to credit programs. And so I'm actually working with the director of CCAPE to actually start doing that process and building more of those pipelines and articulation agreements for our students. I think it's going to be, particularly for the future of higher ed, as we've already seen, micro-credentialing is something that is, I don't think that's going to change. I think that's going to be ongoing. And so I think really looking at workforce needs and thinking about what are those areas that might be growing, how might we support students to help them to get on a pathway for being able to upscale in particular areas if they need to, or, for folks who want to return to school and try a different career track. Maybe you're doing something currently that you like but don't love. And so I think, CCAPE, but also with our academic programs as well, offer those opportunities, particularly with regard to free community college now in Massachusetts, for students to really be able to take advantage of higher educational opportunities that they may not have been able to take advantage of in the past. So I think, that's going to be extremely important in this role for me as well, is working with faculty and staff to really look at what are those, upcoming programs, what are those innovative ways that we can create pathways for our students to be able to reach their personal and their professional goals.
I think that's wonderful. And you just mentioned, working with faculty. And I think something interesting about community colleges is, right, you have so many connections with the community, with employers. And I'm sure, at some point it might be almost overwhelming thinking about the, number of different sources you can get this input from. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about how you are kind of sourcing those community workforce needs and making sure that they're, really rising to the top. So, you and other faculty are able to really, think about how you could develop those into programs.
So I think a lot of that, from what I've seen so far, a lot of it comes from multiple directions and multiple sources, as you said. So really making sure that for a lot of our academic programs, particularly those in the professions, there are advisory boards that work directly with faculty. So that's one way that we get input from workforce and from the community. With CCAPE, like I said, there are a lot of partnerships with particular organizations that we connect with in that sense. So that kind of is another source that we have for getting feedback from the community. We also work very closely with our high schools. So actually had some meetings the last few months with superintendents of all of the different schools in Cape Cod to find out what their needs might be for their students who might be, coming into 4Cs, and what kinds of things might be most beneficial for those students. The other thing is just, direct outreach and connecting to those community organizations, all of those different businesses in Cape Cod as well, and getting input that way. But a lot of it also comes from our faculty who are experts in the field and who are very much plugged in and connected to their various industries. So I think that that's another place where kind of hate to use that word synergy, but it all comes together. And so it's a matter of mapping those things out and figuring out, what are going to be, again, ultimately the best pathways to potentially help students to find rewarding careers or to transfer to four-year colleges and universities, depending on which paths they might be on.
Bridget, I know you were curious about this too, so feel free to ask some follow-up questions on this. But Carlnita, you mentioned the free community college in Massachusetts. Tell us more about that, how that works. Educate us on that.
Yeah, so free community college is something that I'm so excited about. It has been amazing for our students. And essentially what it entails is that students who are in Massachusetts are able to attend community college. They have to take at least 6 credits worth of courses and to stay eligible. They also they must be a student who does not currently have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree in order to take advantage of free community college. But essentially, it really is a program that is opening the door for a lot of students to be able to start school for the first time, and or for people who maybe don't have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree to be able to start on that path of higher education. So it's really making what is usually open access and accessible in terms of community colleges even more accessible for a whole host of students. So it has been wonderful, and it also has really helped with increasing enrollment across the state, so that I think that the number of students who end up having higher education credentials, whether it's from associates or those students who go on to 4-year or master's or PhD, I think it's really opening doors for a number of different students who may not have necessarily considered college in the past because it might have been something that was out of their reach financially.
Yeah. And this, maybe I should know this, maybe this is common knowledge, but are there other programs in other states like this that you're aware of, or is this pretty unique for Massachusetts?
I think that there are a few other programs like this. I feel like California also has something similar. I'm not well versed in some of the other states or other places where this has occurred, but I do think California has something similar, maybe not exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I feel like I know that it's really free now.
Yes, I love this. And Carlnita, you mentioned, seeing increased enrollment, which I think is wonderful. I was curious if you could tell us about, what are some of the other impacts you've seen as a result of this program, for, other states who are considering these programs or considering implementing them. What should your colleagues expect? What have you seen at the 4Cs?
Sure. I mean, I think that, in addition to increased enrollment and also students, to me, again, another one of the exciting things is that there are a number of areas where in our community in Cape Cod, we really need people going into the workforce in certain areas. So nursing is one of those things, healthcare in general, right? So it's providing the opportunity not just for students to be able to pursue their educational pursuits, but also for a lot of students in those key areas that are necessary for the community to be able to pursue those educational pursuits, so that those high demand industries and also just things that we need like nurses, right? Healthcare professionals, funeral services professionals, that those are actually being fulfilled and that we're going to have people coming into the workforce that way. The other piece that I would say for colleagues to expect is really, I think the key issue or the key thing to consider too is with the increased enrollment, really thinking about making sure that there are a number of opportunities for students to be able to take the courses that they need. So the academic scheduling piece, right, is huge as well with an increased enrollment. And then really thinking about ways to support students holistically So looking at increases in terms of student services specifically, so advising, as well as we know in higher ed in general, mental health and wellness, making sure that those resources are in place. Our students also have a need for things like housing, childcare, food. So basic needs are also another area that I think with having more students, those are also things that people need to consider, making sure that those things are set up and are in place. Like at 4Cs, we have a food pantry for our students. We're also working in other areas and particularly also trying to find avenues for providing support for childcare. So we are working on an agreement with the YMCA, which is actually right across the street from our campus, to be able to provide drop-in hours for our students, our faculty, and our staff, which to me, that is huge. That's been one of the key areas that since I've been in higher education, I've really wanted people to take into consideration. So I'm so happy that I'm at an institution that is taking this seriously, because childcare is a very expensive. And I think offering that opportunity for students and peace of mind as well, I think is going to be really important. So I think that's another area. And then finally, thinking about the ways in which we can support faculty and staff in their roles as well.
That's great. And I wanted to go back to something you mentioned about, course offerings, right? I think that's huge. You have increased enrollment, more students coming in, students interested in these high demand programs like nursing that you mentioned. So how are the 4Cs thinking about this? How are you working, with faculty, the registrar's office, to make sure that, you're offering the right courses and enough of them so, students are able to really progress along through their program?
So I think it's really a multi-pronged process. So like you said, all of those different areas, working with the registrar, working with academic deans and faculty, working with student services, admissions, and advising to make sure that we're offering, those courses that are often in high demand, particularly for students who are coming in maybe for the first time through free community college and they need that English 101 or that that psychology 101. So I think that that's another piece. And then looking at staffing of those courses as well. So having to potentially hire additional faculty, whether that's full-time or part-time. So yeah, scheduling is, I kind of laugh about it because I really feel like scheduling is one of the most complex areas within the context of higher ed. So doing all of those things to try to right size the schedule for students.
You mentioned in talking about students and meeting their needs, that being one of your key priorities. You were just sharing the challenge of childcare. I'm curious for you to share your perspective of, I think you said you were 20 years in the classroom as a faculty, and now having the administrator side of it. We are all aware of the common challenges students face when, common challenges students face when they are either starting school for the first time or transitioning back into school. But can you share with us maybe some of your unique perspective of what you saw as a faculty member in the classroom, of maybe some of those needs that we aren't thinking about, or that you're going to carry forward into this work now because you have that experience, with that being one of your priorities?
So I think one of the key areas that I definitely want to focus on is, and you've probably heard this phrase before, it's called student ready colleges. So I think making sure that we as a college are ready for students, and that we also approach them from a strengths-based perspective, meaning our students, I think, and again, I don't want a blanket statement, but I feel like starting out as faculty, 20 years ago, which I can't believe, oh my gosh. Anyway, there were all of these, not all, some faculty that I met who had been in academia for a while, kind of had these attitudes of like, oh, the students just aren't prepared and it was this kind of dismissive, I guess is the best way to say it, about, well, if they don't have this skill and this skill, then I can't teach them how to, and I shouldn't have to. And I think the shift that has happened over time, at least at most of the institutions that I've worked at, which has been really great, is thinking about how we can be better prepared for our students and how we can support students where they are, rather than making assumptions about where we supposedly think they should be. Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
one of the transitions I had to make as an instructor, because they kind of also came from like, you should already know how to do XYZ at first, and then realizing, oh, wait, no, the student has not been taught how to do XYZ. They know how to do this other stuff really well, but this thing, right, is something that needs improvement. So figuring out a way to flip it and say, maybe this means I need to take a step back from the way that I've been teaching and not just make assumptions and kind of go through some things, but to scaffold learning. So that was one of the biggest things that I picked up, that I started to really do, and break down assignments in ways that made them more manageable. Still very challenging, and still always, if you ask any of my former students, high expectations for them academically, because I knew they could do it, right? So setting those high standards, but really breaking things down in a way that helps to make it more manageable and more achievable for a student to achieve those high standards. So that was one of the key things that I felt like I needed to, I guess, learn and unlearn, right, simultaneously. And then I think the other piece is really some of the more acceptance, and also realizing that our students are contending with so many different things on a daily basis, and making sure that we are being empathetic to that, and trying to provide spaces for students to be able to be their whole selves when they come into the classroom, right? So it's not as if you can just compartmentalize and leave behind, if you're worried about paying your rent, if you have
where
to
you're
eat,
going to eat,
like,
how you're
right.
going to,
Yeah, you can't like, oh, I'm in the classroom now, so it's just brain. Like, that doesn't work. That we're human. So also, I think being empathetic to that and realizing that these are the things that students are potentially contending with, and not just that, certainly trying to figure out ways to make those connections for students, not solve problems for students, because, again, I don't think faculty necessarily, that their role is to go like, oh, let me just, fix this for you, but to connect them to resources, right? I noticed that, you seemed like you were having this kind of challenge, or, when I taught, sometimes my students would just come and like share things, and I would go like, oh my gosh, all right, so, let me connect you to this resource that we have at the college. Let me connect you to the food pantry. Let me connect you to mental health and counseling, right? And so that gives students an opportunity also to have agency, and to be able to work with you, as a faculty, to be able to help them figure out resources to get them connected, and make sure that they're able to do the things that they need to do. So I think that's the other piece, that, again, I keep saying learning and unlearning, but that's the other thing that I had to both learn and unlearn simultaneously.
And I think it's, from what I see, I work in the consulting space. And so from what I see, there is often this, we forget that these students are human. And to your point, they are navigating feelings, emotions, challenges, survival anxieties, just stuff in the day to day. And the concept of student ready, we need to be able to meet them where they are, and not say, well, you should have this figured out, or you should do this, or I see that often even in the enrollment stages of the process, where people say, well, if they can't do this, this, and this, then that's on them. And I've never aligned with that thinking, that student ready, really humanizing the process, the experience, and that empathy that you talk about, it's simple, but it's not. It's simple, but it's complex all at the same time. And keeping in the forefront that these are human beings that just so happen to be pursuing their education, and we are there along their journey to support them. And that balance of, yes, we have to hold them accountable and there has to be boundaries, but at the same time, how are you showing up for them based off of where they are at this stage in the process?
Exactly. And there's so many. So the other piece of higher education that is wonderful, I guess, but also sometimes can be challenging is that there's so many unwritten rules about how to navigate an educational career, right? And so if you're a student who is first generation, which I was a first generation college student, and you are stepping into something that is exciting and wonderful, and you're like really excited about pursuing your educational pursuits, but then there are all these other things that are not written. Sometimes it's oral tradition, which is fun, not as well as, even those things that are written, but it's about like, how do I navigate this to get to where I want to go? So I think that's another piece that we as higher educational institutions, administrators, faculty, staff, right, can do better, which is also to help our students, again, particularly those students for whom, this is their first experience with coming to college. Maybe the support systems at home are not there, right? So there's certainly some families where I even had it in my own family from some relatives, like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you spending so much time? Couldn't you be working and earning money right now? Why are you taking this time for this education? What are you going to do with this degree? Right? All that pressure sometimes that our students are facing, and then stepping into an environment that is brand new and trying to figure out, okay, well, this is different, right? How do I navigate this? And particularly for students who I always loved, they were always the best students I ever had. But students who were returning to school, who are older students, always had awesome experiences, professional experiences, added richness to the classroom, and helping those students, particularly some of them, to build confidence in skills that they already have, but may not really recognize that they have them, and getting them to feel more comfortable being in the higher education space, I think is another key thing that is particularly important to do.
Yeah. Bridget, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but I have so much appreciation for when you talk about looking at the whole student, looking at the whole faculty, member, person, human being, student ready, the focus on staff development and coaching and development. That you're speaking my language. So just so much appreciation for that.
Thank you.
And the passion that you carry for that, and obviously how that translates for your students in the classroom and now your faculty team.
And something I've been thinking about as both of you have been going back and forth here is just how, I think really there's kind of two parts of this, is both, the mindset shift that you were talking about, Carlnita, but then also, the structural issues underlying this, making sure that students have those opportunities to gain those skills, or we kind of unveil some of, that lingo they might be unaware of. So I was hoping you could maybe share an example or two of, some of the, perhaps programs or approaches that, the 4Cs have put in place to really help students kind of overcome some of those existing barriers.
So I think, one of the key things, and this is ongoing and certainly is something that I'm going to be working on as well, is looking at places where we may have policies and or procedures that are creating barriers for our students, whether those are intentional or unintentional, right? So that's one key place. I think the other is specifically focused on the ways in which we are advising our students. So I think 4Cs does an excellent job of student advising, really working with students to help them figure out their academic pathways. The other piece of that really is not just with professional advisors, but also faculty advisors as well. So having that relationship, and this is also another area that myself and my counterpart are going to be delving into even more. So I think that that's another place where students sometimes get caught up, because if you're a student who is trying to figure out an academic program of study, and sometimes students do this, they'll go like, oh, these classes look interesting. So you take a bunch of classes, but you're not seeing how those classes are aligned with your academic program. And then you end up taking classes that like, oh, well, wait, this isn't going to transfer to the 4-year college or university that I want to go to. Whoops. So I've taken extra credits, which means I've spent extra time and extra money. So I really think that piece is something that is key to helping to support students.
Yes, no, absolutely. And Jody, feel free to jump in if you want to. But Carly, I would love to kind of follow up on that. You mentioned the pathways aspect, right? We don't want students, spending that extra time and money on courses that aren't going to lead to their ultimate goal, whether that is, completing their degree at the 4Cs or transferring, whatever it happens to be. So can you tell me a little bit about, are the 4Cs using a guided pathways approach? How are you, really helping students clearly see that path towards their goal?
So we're not currently using a guided pathways approach in terms of that particular model. But my understanding is that there is a lot of direct support from academic advising to work with students in order to help them to be able to figure out what their particular course of study is, and also in terms of particularly with our transfer office, really also helping students to ensure that they are able to, if they are interested in transfer to that 4-year institution, and looking at developing more articulation agreements with different colleges and universities as well.
Carlnita, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that we haven't touched on or talked about related to the 4Cs or your role or your work within higher ed that you wanted to share with us?
So I think the only other thing that I can mention that is really exciting that 4Cs is doing is that we have an aviation maintenance technology program that is doing extremely well and is growing. It also is an area in which students really can come out of school, finish the program, and jump right into a very well-paying job within the industry. So that program, we are expected, will definitely continue to grow in the future. And we're really excited about that. So that would be one area. Aside from that, I just, like I said, I'm so thrilled to be at 4Cs and to be in this role. In many ways, this is a dream job for me, because it pulls together all of those various experiences that I've had in the past and all of my other roles, whether it was in the classroom as faculty, as an advisor, directing a program, creating curricula. So it just kind of pulls all those experiences together into one position, and also allows me the opportunity to do so from the level of looking at things strategically. I love strategy. Strategy is my love language. So yeah, it's just been a perfect fit for me, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds and how we're going to continue to grow, and also to support our faculty, our staff, and our students, and also our community.
I'm sure your faculty, if they don't already, they will feel that same passion and commitment that you transferred to your students when you were in the classroom. So that's super exciting for you and for them as all this evolves. Bridget, any last questions from you for Carlnita?
I mean, Jody, I think that really teed it up for a perfect end there. I mean, I love, the enthusiasm and forward-looking aspects there.
Well, before we close things out, Bridget, can you share with us and the folks listening a little bit more about Course Dog? It's such a
Yes,
unique name.
absolutely.
I love it. It's catchy.
Yes,
So tell us.
yes, and we love to use dogs in our branding too, which makes it all the better. But yeah, happy to share a little bit more. So CourseDog is the academic operations platform. So we really help institutions manage all of those academic processes that are going on behind the scenes. So whether that is creating your course schedule, managing curriculum changes, creating the catalog, running through those assessment cycles. So our goal is really to help institutions manage all of those in one central platform, which is then integrated with your SIS, making sure that you, of course, have accurate data for all of those processes that you're managing. So I think if I really had to sum it up, I would say that our goal is really to help, administrators save time, be more efficient, but then also build more student-centric processes and, make sure students are getting into the classes they need and getting that curriculum information that they need.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for being here today. What a wonderful conversation. And I really enjoyed learning more about you, Carlnita, and your commitment, your vision, 4Cs. I lived in Massachusetts for a very brief time, but I wasn't connected to the 4Cs at all. So now I feel like I have more knowledge and more education. So thank you for the time today. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Ed Up Experience, where we make education your business. Our special guest, Dr. Carlnita P. Greene, Vice President of Academic Affairs at Cape Cod Community College, also known as the 4Cs. And my co-host here, Bridget Moran, Senior Content Manager at CourseDog. I'm your host, Dr. Jody Blinko. Thank you all for being here with us, and we will talk with you again soon.
Thank you for listening to this uninterrupted episode brought to you by CourseDog. CourseDog is the intelligent academic operations platform unifying how higher ed manages scheduling, curriculum, catalog, assessment, and more. Built on a layer of actionable analytics and seamless integrations with every major SIS and LMS. CourseDog is where academic operations drive student success. To learn more, please go to coursedog.com. That's COURSEDOG.com.